Jewish Channel's Week in Review. As war with Hamas may be winding down, what Israel needs to worry about in the long term, what the Russian-American Jewish community has to say about the conflict, dating on a special Jewish day, and more of the Jewish news that's changing your world right now in this episode of the Week in Review. Hello, and welcome to the Jewish Channel's Week in Review. I'm Stephen I. Weiss. As we go to air this week, there are signs that Israel's war with Hamas is both winding down and escalating. The withdrawal of some ground troops while keeping airstrikes going from Israel's side, and then continuing rocket fire and what appear to be terror attacks in Israel from Hamas all suggest that even when this war is declared over by one side or another, it's hard to say what exactly will mark the point where the war ends and regular life resumes. For those concerned with Israel's future, however, the war itself has already revealed much of what is to come and what paths can be taken. Most directly, Israel has gone from receiving strong backing by the United States and Europe to being condemned for repeated attacks near United Nations facilities that led to civilian deaths. In recent weeks, we've reported on U.S. and European statements that were at times perhaps surprisingly in step with Israeli attitudes about the war, strongly condemning rocket fire from Gaza and calling for the disarmament of various groups and a renouncing of violence from Hamas. But continued Israeli attacks that killed civilians at or near UN facilities appear to have led the U.S. and some European nations to take a step back from their support of Israel's military activities. The United States is appalled by today's disgraceful shelling outside an UNRWA school in Rafah, sheltering some 3,000 displaced persons, in which 10 more Palestinian civilians were tragically killed, read a State Department statement on Sunday, adding, "We once again stress that Israel do more to meet its own standards and avoid civilian casualties." The statement declared further, "The suspicion that militants are operating nearby does not justify strikes that put at risk the lives of so many innocent civilians." A statement from France's foreign minister contains similar language, as did one from the foreign secretary of the United Kingdom. On the heels of those statements, a detailed New York Times investigation released on Monday found that an attack that produced several direct hits on a United Nations school building being used as a shelter for displaced Palestinians, quote, were likely to have come from heavy artillery not designed for precision use. Overall, a cloud very clearly now hangs over this war as regards Israel's position of holding a moral high ground in its conflict with Hamas, where 2 weeks ago it found a great amount of more agreement in the international sphere. But regardless of how this war itself is perceived, Israel will have gained a deeper alliance with Western democracies if it can turn this military campaign against Hamas into a diplomatic campaign that further empowers other Palestinian figures and leads to peace talks and a Palestinian state. The big question about that is whether Israel, and specifically the government of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, has plans to do so. The large divide here is about how Israel, the West broadly, and even Arab states like Egypt and Saudi Arabia view Hamas on the one hand, and Fatah, the Palestinian Authority, and their leader Mahmoud Abbas on the other hand. Take again, for example, the statements of relative support for Israel as it initially responded to Hamas airstrikes in recent weeks. One very strong statement of support was issued collectively by 28 European foreign ministers through the European Union. That's a near universal statement opposed to Hamas tactics. On the other hand, one can look at the push made by Abbas in the United Nations for recognition of a Palestinian state in 2012. Both the U.S. and Israel pushed all the diplomatic buttons available to try to get other countries to vote no on Abbas's push for recognition of Palestine, arguing that such a move should be part of final status negotiations. Out of 188 countries that registered to vote, only 7 other countries voted with the preferred approach laid out by Netanyahu and President Barack Obama. Of those 7, only the Czech Republic and Canada are major players on the world stage. The Netanyahu government's policy on Fatah, Abbas, and the Palestinian Authority, therefore, has in essence lost the votes of the UK, France, Germany, the Netherlands, Sweden, Australia, and more, while that same government was able to maintain a pretty strong coalition on its approach to Hamas until the repeated shellings of UN facilities took place. And compared with 2012, Israel can now add several major Arab states to its list of allies on Hamas. But all those parties want to see the Netanyahu government do what it seems not to have done: empower Fatah, Abbas, and the Palestinian Authority, and push hard for an independent and viable Palestinian state. As this war with Hamas shows signs of winding down, the signs that the Netanyahu government intends to pursue that path are what many government leaders around the globe will be looking for. Meantime, here in the U.S., Jewish support for Israel is taking many forms. Christian Needon stopped by the heavily Russian immigrant community of Brighton Beach, Brooklyn, to check in on a rally there.
The Brighton Beach boardwalk filled with people showing their support for Israel's war against Hamas on Sunday, but the voices that were raised from the podium were mostly speaking in Russian, reflecting the heavily Russian heritage composition of this southernmost section of Brooklyn. The rally was organized by Gregory Davidson, who runs Russian-language Davidson Radio, and who explained why such demonstrations of support for Israel are important for local Jews.
A lot of us have relatives there, parents, children, some of them in army, we have friends, and all lives in danger right now. And we would like to send very strong message to president, to government. Israel required much more help, and the United States should take the position. Because you can support one side or another side, but you have to tell one side is democratic, another side is terror.
Making sure that message was loud and clear, huge speakers amplified the messages of a variety of orators, and Davidson noted why it was crucial those messages were delivered in Russian.
You will see a lot of elderly people, they don't speak English. So to make the meetings and messages in Russian, it's bring more effect. Good evening, New York. Good night, Israel. 6 часов вечера в Нью-Йорке, час ночи в Израиле. Everybody know today Russian people, citizens, Russian people vote. And I believe that what is most politician concern is the voters. And this is, I really want that our message will be heard in Washington. Президент, Сенат, Конгресс, вы должны сделать все возможное и невозможное, чтобы помочь Израилю бороться с терроризмом. You will see we have many people from Israel will be participate this meeting. We have some people from Knesset will be from Israel over the phone. They will talk to us.
Им сегодня важно, чтобы вот эта поддержка, которую им оказывает Министерство Алии в Турции.
A more local political speaker was Ben Axelrod, a Jewish immigrant from the former Soviet Union who is running for the New York State Assembly in the 45th District and who also helped organize the event.
Today, as we stand here in support of Israel, IDF soldiers are being killed and cities are being bombarded by rockets. We cannot and we will not be silent. We all must stand up to those who want to build a world of terror instead of a world of peace and harmony.
To see more from the Brighton Beach rally in support of Israel, please tune into the full broadcast edition of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Christian. This week will be the traditional Jewish dating holiday of Tu B'Av. Meredith Gansman spoke with a relationships counselor to get some advice in advance of the big day.
Love is in the air, right in time for the Jewish holiday of love, Tu B'Av, which falls this year on August 11th. And although love can be simple, relationships can be hard. And that's when it's time to call in an expert.
He was wearing a really cool fedora as he was leaving, and I don't know, he looked like a musician to me, so I asked him if he was a musician.
That's what 29-year-old Long Island native Jennifer remembers about first meeting 40-year-old Manhattanite Akiva earlier this year over a Shabbat weekend retreat.
Well, I thought Jenny was very warm and open. She was engaging. She asked a lot of questions.
When we first met Jenny and Akiva, they had been dating for a few months. Marriage was on the table, but they weren't quite ready to commit. So they sought advice from a pro. Marriage and dating expert Hannah Levitan has been advising couples for 25 years and is the author of I Only Want to Get Married Once.
Love is a verb. That's the most important thing to remember. We gotta just practice love.
Levitan allowed us to sit in on her session with Akiva and Jenny back in April to see how her process works. She says, when in doubt about your potential partner, ask yourself,
Number one, do you share the same values?
Top 5 values: honesty, integrity, commitment, sense of humor, and family.
Family, being somebody that's giving and giving back to the community and to each other. Always being committed to growth, hard work.
Levitan says infatuation may fade, but values stick.
Okay, in terms of how you see yourselves building a home, have you spoken about children, how you would bring your children up?
I went a little bit of a larger family than he does,
Right.
but we've come to a compromise for the most part. But
For the most part.
yeah, well, ish.
Let's just have one.
Okay. The word for marriage in Hebrew is nisu'in, which means to lift up or to grow. So if we're looking for this perfect marriage, or we think there's something wrong with our marriage because there are issues, then we don't understand what marriage is. So what's coming up? How's the communication?
I think she just assumes that I understand, or I know at that very moment what she needs.
Levitan says in order to experience love, we need emotional intimacy.
And intimacy is into me see. That means if we want to love someone and experience emotional intimacy, we have to let them see who we are.
To see more from relationship expert Hannah Levitan, tune into the full broadcast version of The Week in Review.
Thank you, Meredith. Finally, this week on Up Close, 2 stories of personal transformation within the Jewish tradition, one fictional, one quite real. For former Parade magazine editor-in-chief Lee Kravitz, the free time that came with reaching career milestones and seeing his children reach adolescence rekindled his spiritual interests. The journeys he took are recounted in his memoir, Pilgrim, Risking the Life I Have to Find the Faith I Seek. But for Judith Frank, it was imagining some of the worst possible life changes, the loss of loved ones, that led her to write a novel that tackles the story of a gay couple in Massachusetts adopting the children of a brother lost in a Palestinian suicide bombing in Israel. We talk about her book, All I Love and Know. Here are some of the highlights from my interview with Judith Frank. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict, gay marriage, adoption, terrorism, how to deal with parenting. I'm trying to think of what hot button issues aren't in this novel.
A friend of mine said, there's a lot of story in this book. There are.
Yeah.
What I wanted to do is write a story that would somehow be about Israel-Palestine and about gay life, to figure out how to merge those into a story. And I knew very early that I wanted to start with a terrorist attack, and I wanted to open with it, and that I wanted to end it on the day that gay marriage became legal in Massachusetts. And I didn't know what the connection was between those things, and I just sort of wrote my way to that.
A large part of this is an issue that every Jewish person thinks about, which is their relationship to Israel.
That's right.
And it's particularly fraught for one of the main characters in your book, this guy Daniel, whose brother is lost and who takes over the custody of these children, because he was a real hardcore love Israel kind of guy.
Yep.
He spent some time there as a kid, and then his liberal politics don't line up with what he'd imagined it could be.
You know, American Jews, we grew up with a really romantic view of Israel in a lot of ways. And Israel, you know, I have many people there whom I love a lot. But it was only when I left that and started to read and started to get educated that I started to realize how much I couldn't see when I was there. How much, like, the very architecture of Israel, the very road system of Israel keeps me from seeing a people that was really very close to me, actually. Like, they would be, you know, half a mile away, right? And I could not see Palestinian life. It was just not visible to me. So I was thinking about the fact, and also there's the fact that, and I'm not sure this happens as much as it used to, but, you know, Israelis saying, you know, you shouldn't speak about this because you don't live here. You don't have to live, you know, close to it. And I was thinking, you know, there are some things that you can see close up, and there are also some things you can see from far away, right? And I wanted to explore that in the book.
This book is very much about trying to get past trauma in many ways, from terrorism, from his brothers-in-laws are Holocaust survivors, but his parents were traumatic for him growing up.
Yeah.
And trying to, through parenting, just
overcome that.
Yeah. And so what are you exploring there?
I don't think of his parents as having been a trauma on the level of the other traumas. I think that
not on the
good,
right.
Yeah, right. But even traumatic. Like, I don't think they're traumatic. I think they're not easy. They're a very achievement-oriented Jewish family. They wanted him to do extremely well. He was always a little bit anti-ambitious, a kind of guy who pulls back and, you know, and thinks that might be shallow to be super ambitious. But yes, the book, I mean, that was one of the challenges for me, is how do I write a book? You know, Daniel is basically mourning throughout the entire book, and it was clear to me that that was going to be a really challenging thing to write, to keep readers involved with him, because we know in life that people will take a year or more, they'll take a long time, but we don't necessarily want them to in fiction, right? We want people to get better. And he really doesn't get better for a really long time. And the biggest challenge and the most rewriting was trying to figure out a way to go deep into his trauma.
You can see the full episode of Up Close on the Jewish Channel on cable. You can also listen to the full audio of Up Close as a podcast available on iTunes or in your favorite podcast player. That's all for this week. From all of us here at the Jewish Channel, be well. The Jewish Channel is available on cable, Time Warner Cable Channel 1640, IOUPLink Channel 505, RCN Channel 268, Cox Cable Channel 1, Bright House Channel 330, Verizon Fios Channel 900, and on Comcast on the on-demand menu on premium channels. For more information, visit tjctv.com.